attention is the most valuable commodity of a human being, and that anything that results in the theft of your attention strikes at the core essence of your value. Gaining mastery over the way life presents to you has been afforded to people on the condition that they become a recluse from life and enter a monastery.
What was it that your clinic did differently from everyone else that made such a difference to your clinic and your community?
Everybody talks about insight and inner balance in an abstraction. I framed it in actual action.
I'm Michael Hunter with Uncommon Teams, and today we'll uncover fresh insights into what it means to lead today. Joining me is Dr. Ravi Iyer. Dr. Iyer is a multi-book author, multi-million view 3x TEDx speaker who is in the less than 1% of iconoclasts whose talks have been taken down and then reinstated by TED. He's also a Who's Who in America nominee, a Harvard-trained physician, a global educator, and a human potential development expert. Welcome, Dr. Iyer. When, Dr. Iyer, did you first recognize that integrating your whole self and bringing that into everything that you do might be a valuable approach?
So, I always knew it, but I never really, it never coalesced until the pandemic that the ability to really integrate the totality of your being into the way you navigate your life is so critical to the way you live and conduct your business. And that insight kind of hit me like a ton of bricks during the pandemic, because the whole world the pandemic in a sense was an experiment. It was a global experiment that ripped away the facade of normalcy across the entire world and forced the entire world to come to grips with the essential unpredictableness of human existence. And when that happened, you began to see who had their act together and who was just playing a game. And sadly, the vast majority of the world did not have their act together. And they were running around like chickens with their heads cut off. And at that time, my clinic and the team I was leading, we were able to not only successfully navigate the pandemic for ourselves, but we were able to conduct an entire community of about 100,000 people through the pandemic without losing their bearings. And after the pandemic was over, I decided that I needed to take the methodology and the techniques that we used from a one-to-one person transmission that I had been doing for 42 years. I decided that I needed to take it to a one-to-many platform. So I wrote a book, and then from there I started talking about it on podcasts and stuff like that. And about 50, 60 podcasts later, I decided to do a TED Talk. And that went viral. And after that, I felt that I needed to amplify the idea further. And I gave a second talk on the idea of how attention is the most valuable commodity of a human being, and that anything that results in the theft of your attention strikes at the core essence of your value. That was my second TED Talk. And then the third one that I gave in March was about how community essentially defines the ability of a message to get propagated. And so these three things, focus, connection, and community, was the three pillars of performance. And I started propagating that in my work. and started actually becoming vocal about it. But the essence is, this is all these things that I talk about is not new. It's been there for centuries. But for centuries, the methodology of gaining mastery over the way life presents to you has been afforded to people on the condition that A, they rec- become a recluse from life and enter a monastery, and there they find mastery over how life presents. But that is not an option anymore in today's world. People need to be shown how to gain mastery over their lives while they are in the midst of it. And that is, so I basically took ancient methodologies and ancient wisdom and reframed it in the idiom, metaphor, and language of modern dialogue. And so instead of using words like consciousness and self, I use words like your perception and your narrative. Instead of saying go into a thought free state, I say your narratives are just your meaning making machine giving meanings, and that is the menu of the meal of life. And people are eating the menu instead of the meal. So these are the analogies I use. They are not new, they have been spoken about before, but I just present it differently.
What was it that your clinic did differently from everyone else that made such a difference to your clinic and your community then, and is making such a difference to the people you talk with now?
So, one of the first things we did was, see, everybody talks about insight and inner balance in an abstraction. I framed it in actual action. For example, people talk about, oh, we have to feel connected, we are all our brother's keeper. But I said in my clinic, we translated our brother's keeper into a policy that we called the Three Musketeers policy. The Three Musketeers policy was borrowed from the Alexander Dumas movie, All for One, One for All, where every member of the team was taught to act only for the preservation of their fellow member, not their own. And when I instituted that as a policy, we started by making, we would go out into the parking lot to treat COVID patients in their cars, and each we would go out in teams of two where one person would watch out for the other person. So the other person is actually uh, doing the swab, the nasal swab, getting exposed to the biological fluids and biological products, and the other person is standing there watching intently if there was a break in infection control. And if there was any break, immediately she had a gun where she would spray disinfectant upon her partner. So, in this way, we kept each other safe. But that came directly out of this idea that each person's safety was dependent on the other person being safe.